So good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today in our Climate Governance, Accountability and Implementation Summary. With me today on the call is Devanshi, and we are going to present everything that we learned so far from the series that we held throughout last year. Because this is a workshop, or we wanted to make similar experience as the workshop that we held in December for the in-person. We want also to gather input from you. So that's why we prepared these questions in Menti. And you can do it on your own pace on the back and the background while you're listening to the presentation. We'll have 3 points at which we're going to remind you about the Menti, and then at the end also review some of your answers. But this is going to be helpful for us to continue through your questions. We are also trying to adjust the presentations that we are seeking in order to answer your questions. And this is a work that it's going to continue in 2024 as well. So it's going to be very helpful. So you can go to www.menti.com. The code is 13717021. Also, we share the link in the chat as well. Also, write your name of your municipality so we know who is answering. Thanks so much. Now we're going to continue with land acknowledgement. Clean Air Partnership is Toronto-based organization, and we acknowledge that the land on which we operate is the traditional territories of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. In our effort to be more meaningful when we do a land acknowledgement, we are sharing a short videos so we can learn something more and new about Indigenous culture and life. In this video from Janong Webb, we're gonna learn more about why we need to decolonize the way we interpret Indigenous methods and practices.
We need to decolonize the way we interpret Indigenous methods. Here's what I mean.
You're not practicing being Indigenous unless you're fishing from a canoe and hunting with a bow and arrow.
Ever since the beginning of colonization, the Western world has kept Indigenous cultures locked away in the past in a box, where if we don't portray as your classic Western Indian style like in the movies, we're somehow not practicing being Indigenous. Or Indigenous art somehow isn't Indigenous art if it's not all beads and dream catchers. The truth is, we've never existed the same way for the tens of thousands of years that we've lived here. Like the other nations of the world, we adapt, adopt, and evolve our methods and practices to suit us for the time that we're living in. We have engineers, doctors, craft people, politicians, farmers, you name it, all with practices that at the end of every day will always be Indigenous. We're not always going to be the Indian you had in mind. Miigwech for listening.
Miigwech for listening with me this video. So kind of like moving on to what's the purpose of this webinar is really to summarize what we learned from the series, but also beyond that. And to brainstorm together if what we heard is applicable to your municipality. So for that, for those who are joining now, we have a Menti that you can complete on the back end. We're going to share a link in the chat so you can help us contribute to our brainstorming for this webinar. And collect further questions so that we can target our further presentations and webinars and research so that we can be the most help to you. Really briefly, a background that kind of like it's a timeline that most of our CSC municipalities follow. In 2019, 2020 is when most of municipalities commit to climate action through their climate emergency declarations. Then 2020, 2022 is when this commitments turned into action plans, and it was the period of developing or updating the climate action plans. And now we're in the process of implementing, and we were a bit, I guess, not that passion or not that patient, because we're like, why implementation is not happening? But actually what we learned, and I know some of you as well feel that way, but actually implementation is happening. It's just a slow process, as you know, and we know. But we wanted to explore like what is the ambitious and what makes more implementation to happen. So when we started our webinar series, we had in our mind, based on our conversations with you and our kind of like research and like what difference does governance make for climate ambition, resources, and implementation? And then on the accountability side, as you know, for the last years, Clean Air Partnership has been pushing a lot in that area. And we wanted to know, what does municipal council and departmental accountability look like? What informal accountability structures lead to climate action implementation? And overall, how the governance and accountability support implementation, and what process support that. So we ask you in the first webinar, what do you think and what answers you wanna know? And these are the questions that we collect from you, and then we actually made sure that the presentations that we have in the municipalities that showcase their experience, it's answering these questions as well. So the presentation will go as follows, for the kind of like following the governance, accountability, and implementation. And we all know that one of the biggest barrier for implementation is funding. So that Devanshi is gonna show, show us a summary of financial mechanisms that we know thus far. So on the governance piece, the questions that you ask is, in which department is the climate team located and what difference does it make? What are good interdepartmental approaches, and how are interdepartmental teams set up, manage, tracked, and maintained? And in the next slides, I'm gonna show you a couple structures and try to answer these questions and summarize. It's not me answering, but it's what we heard from you. So this is a structure from Durham region. Climate staff is part of the office of the CAO. The structure that you see on the graph, it's based on the structure related to carbon budgeting. So there is an energy and emission implementation support team. Here we see on the bottom of the graph. This is on a staff level, which works with departmental leads to develop GHG reduction projects for inclusion in the budget, business planning, and process. The forecasted impacts of the project outlined in the budget, business planning process are reported to the director level. And this is happening in the second fiscal quarter, where there's still potential for directors to adjust budgets and capital forecasts to better align the carbon forecast with established GHG reduction targets. Once the refinements are made, the carbon forecast is presented to the department head committee. This is just below the top level, and these are the CAO and commissioners for awareness and approval, which then goes to the regional council in terms of annual corporate climate report. Similarly, we have similar structure uses Whitby, not a surprise. There are lower municipalities in Durham region. Their climate staff is part of the office of the CAO as well. And the experience they shared with us in person workshop was that really there is like kind of like the proactive and ambitious of the municipality comes from senior leadership team. And also of the fact that they used 3 internal committees, which is the Internal Climate Change Committee, the corporate energy team focusing on implementing zero carbon Whitby, the corporate sustainability team, which focuses on kind of like programs like tree planting and recycling programs, and then the Whitby Green Standard project team, which focuses on the implementation of the Whitby Green Standards. Something that we see as a leading practice, and we heard this from Whitby, Calgary, Toronto, and other municipalities, is the use of the External Climate Change Committee. That in this committee, it's focused specifically on implementation of a certain strategy. In the case of Whitby, it's the implementation of a zero carbon Whitby. And the external committee includes citizens, youth representatives, at least one council member, and business representative. And why this is it's working very well, it's because it first provides a variety of stakeholders in the decisions, but also it works as providing an expertise at the same time monitoring what the council decisions will be once they have the expertise. So it's kind of like a win-win there. Another structure is from Calgary that we see here on the screen. Calgary Climate Staff is in the planning department, but a little bit of background. 5 years ago, they had a staff team that works on climate, and they were located under utility department, so with waste and water services, and that made them siloed from some of the major decisions process. So to better support delivery of their climate programs, climate staff were moved into the planning and development services, which oversees implementation of the municipal development plans, such as capital projects, planning strategies, land use planning, and etc. So here, the focus on the slide is on the small graph in your right corner. On the bottom, now 5 years later, they have 35 folks working on climate in 4 climate teams: climate mitigation team, natural environment and climate adaptation team, and environmental management. Then the 4th team is 3 people that work specifically on climate governance and reporting to improve accountability by measuring the progress of mitigation and resilience across services and reporting directly to executive leadership and the council. On the bigger structure here, the graph, in pink, that shows the carbon budget structure. So looking at the top bottom, they have an executive leadership team, which is the ultimate responsible. And the director of the climate and environment is the executive sponsor. Then one level down are the corporate planning and the climate and environment managers, who are the project leads, and then it's implemented across all services. So in summary here, the pros and cons of where the staff is located. There is no wrong and right. There are different strategies, and what it was confirmed is that there are other factors that have bigger role in the ambitions of municipalities to follow through climate actions. And these bigger factors are council climate commitment, climate leadership at the CAO and city manager, finance lead. This was definitely stood out from all the presentations and discussions that we have thus far. If there is a finance climate champion, then the whole corporation is more aligned with following through and working on climate together. Use of various advisory internal and external groups and interdivisional senior management staff groups. Okay, a little pause. Welcome to everyone who joined us later. On the back end, I'm presenting, and please continue be with us. But on the back end, we have a Menti with some questions that we're going to brainstorm at the end of this presentation. And we share a link in the chat to Menti. So if you can join and on your pace, answer now or after the presentation. But just so you know that we are doing this. And also, if you have any questions, feel free to interrupt me or keep them for after the presentation or write them in the chat. Okay, now moving to accountability. The questions that you ask are how to incentivize other divisions to act on climate, what is the role of municipal data collection and how it is shared across divisions, and how to track climate implementation across municipal decisions. and a plugin. We have the Climate Accountability Toolkit. We're going to share a link in the chat now so you can access it. In this toolkit, we are going in very details on the 5 on-ramps that we think that is going to bring your municipality to really climate accountability. These are the climate emergency declaration, climate action plans, climate lens application, carbon budgeting, and TCFD. We are going to talk in this, we're kind of like in the summary, in the webinar series that we have, we touched based on the first 4 on-ramps, but TCFD, for now, we're going to wait and get a little bit more research going on, and we'll be sharing more on this probably at the end of this year. But as you know, we have briefing notes and other resources to support you if you're going in that direction. So the leadership practices in climate accountability are strong governance and oversight, climate conscious decisions across municipal departments, standardized data and frameworks, detailed action identification and budget allocation, enhanced financial planning with integrated climate into regular financial budgeting process, and monitoring, evaluating, and reporting. And so in the next slides, I'm gonna summarize and provide example for each of these 6 leadership practices based on what we heard from the presentations from the series. So starting up with the City of Toronto, a very good example of strong governance and oversight is their climate bylaw. So their carbon accountability framework, it's a system with rules, guidelines, and tools to track climate action, and it helps measure how the city reduces greenhouse gases, how it affects the finance, and any legal implications. This is the framework. Within the framework, they have 2 policies, 2 processes, and many tools. And I think something that stood out is their climate bylaw policy. As part of the Municipal Act, every municipality can enable such bylaw. The City of Toronto added a new climate change goals and governance chapter of Toronto's municipal code. So this functions as a public commitment of the process the city will follow in reducing GHG emissions and achieving net zero. This bylaw supports the transparency of the process and in a way enforces people to follow procedures and sets the expectations to apply the carbon accountability framework. So it sets the governance and accountability of the framework. It also outlines the mechanism that will be triggered should the budget targets are not met and not achieved. The second policy is the new carbon offset credit policy that defines the net zero, what net zero means for City of Toronto. Then they have the 2 processes, the climate lens requirements in capital and operating budget process. This is a process of applying climate lens into the capital and operating budgets. And then the second one is setting the emissions budgets. And I'm going to go in a little bit of details in the next slide, but the 3 pieces here, the bylaw, the climate lens, and the emissions budget support the creation of the carbon budget report, which is a tool to report on all activities and how they relate to GHG emissions. And this is another leading practices, and I know that most of you are going to that direction in order to be accountable and to make sure that they're on the track to net zero. But the way that City of Toronto is doing it is that the carbon budget is the outcome of the accountability system, and it is linked to the annual financial report. So it will be annual report as well. The carbon budget reports key actions and the money required to get the city close to net zero, as well as tracks the progress. So the climate bylaw defines carbon budget, timelines, responsibilities. The process, the capital and operating budgets, this is They have a system where a project is submitted, staff needs to respond to, does this project project has GHG impact, yes or no? Does it improve climate resiliency, yes or no? And the city is working right now in providing methodology to support staff in quantifying GHG emissions if the answer is yes. Otherwise, in the current system, they're using screen questions. The budgets are linked to predetermined GHG reductions actions as part of the Transform TO, which helps see where investments are made and in which departments are this investment made, corporate or community. And then the second process, the community and corporate emissions, defines the total emissions of a carbon dioxide for the jurisdictions over a period of time. So City of Toronto choose a period of time of 5 years for kind of like two reasons. The first one is that it gives enough time to check if the actions that council has adopted will actually be enough to achieve future emissions reduction targets, as well as providing flexibility, because if there is a year that there's an implementation of a project with higher GHG emissions that exceeds the annual cap, then they can adjust and next year kind of like reduce the cap so that they're still overall on a track to net zero by 2040, or by the end of the 5 years first, and then by 2040. For the corporate emissions, focus is only on building and transportation. And as part of the tools that support the accountability framework is also their climate lens. So on one side, they see climate lens as the climate lens influence decision-making and encourages staff to think about climate implications from the beginning of the project. It involves providing tools and training to support staff to understanding and connect the dots between their work and targets that the municipality set. But at the same time, City of Toronto is working on this one place where staff is reporting. That's where the tools are, and it's a one platform that allows for standardized reporting, which supports the transparency of actions and therefore informs better decision making. And that's where the report on impact is through the annual budget and carbon budget report. I know that this slide is a lot of information, but here on the very left side, it's the tools that they provide, including training, climate view map, climate policy map, and screening too. And Ash was very generous of actually providing access to some of this to our CAC members. So if you are interested, contact us, and you can get more details of those tools. Okay, moving on to another climate lens application, very different approach from Peel Region. The focus of applying a climate lens in Peel Region is increasing the desire to work on climate across employees. They use this ADKAR change model, and Jeremy put it very, very well when they presented. They were one of the presenters in the series. Is that there is a lot of focus traditionally on climate lens. There is a lot of focus on providing training and tools, which focuses on like the awareness and knowledge. But he said it that if someone, and I'm trying to quote him here, but if someone wants to learn something, has the desire, then they'll learn it by themselves anyway. So the focus for Peel Region is to kind of like to motivate the employees. And so the way that they did that is through a climate change and finance symposium to support the desire to work on climate actions, where different private and public financial sectors, such as banks and insurance companies, shared how climate is part of their job profile, and how now working on climate is almost part, it's like a skill that it's almost part of any job offer out there. So it's very transferable. Together with that event, Pure Region is also have an engagement plan. Their climate lens really focuses on change-centric tactics based on the different types of stages of climate awareness every employee has. It was pointed out from this presentation that having a finance climate champion, it's very beneficial to make sure that everyone is working for that one goal of net zero. The other example of climate lens application is from Brantford. Rebecca presented, and she was there in the in-person workshop. And their climate lens sits on two components: report section, which is the climate and environmental implications part of the council reports that staff is preparing when they are submitting their projects, and a calculator tool. And the calculator tool is developed in-house with IT department, no external cost. It is an Excel file, but it's working very well. And it's not detailed, but provides a GHG estimates that are good enough in order to inform council and to track GHG emissions so that towards a Brantford carbon budget and generally informed decision making. I like how they went for it. They did not care that much to be a perfectionist in what the tool looks like. They kind of like use this like 80-20 approach, and the 20% of perfectionism was left to like deal in later on. And now it's paying off because they had a 1 year pilot project. During this 1 year, Rebecca shared that there was more time spent on adjusting and improving the climate and environmental implications, which is the quantifying part of like how a project is impacting the goals of the municipality. And also a little bit more education on the calculator too. But after 1 year, she said that really staff capacity is great. So now there is very little intervention that she needs to do in order the reporting to happen. So yeah, great example. Moving on to City of Calgary, and they used another approach for strong governance and oversight. They passed an accountability, the council passed accountability notice of motion, which directs administration to improve transparency and accountability on climate change, including to develop a reporting framework, provide ongoing expenditure reports. The motion then evolved over the last 2 years in creating multiple levels of accountability, external and internal. And as mentioned, I mentioned it already in the previous slides, but they also use this external climate advisory committee of council. And here the story was very good because they started as a panel and it was volunteer committee, but it very quickly they understood that there's no much connection with the council. There were not many times that they can meet. So in 2022, council approved the creation of this committee, which allowed for more frequent meeting, formalized advisory relationship, and make it directly accountable to council. They have a term of reference, and they are they're also like a part of the councillors. I think they have 2 councillors that needs to be part of this committee. And the focus of the committee is on implementation. The benefits are that they're an external group of experts similarly, so they work as a providing expertise, but also making sure that the council is accountable for the commitments and decisions they're taking. In regards to the climate lens application and monitoring, evaluation, and reporting, leading practices here, similar to City of Toronto, they have one platform, which it's the Climate and Environmental analytics project that it should be completed very soon. They said in like February and March 2024. The final product is an online data analysis and advanced analytics platform, providing city staff a set of tools to facilitate collective climate and environmental monitoring, reporting, and forecasting. What this means is that in this one platform, they have all the needed education, resources, and information for staff. But also it's a standardized reporting, so that staff, and then the standardized reporting supports the transparency of data and decision taking. And then the same platform has a dashboard feature that it's set on their website so that the community can be informed of the decisions that the municipality is taking, thus being accountable and transparent of these actions. So this seems to be the way to go and be like proactive in monitoring, evaluation, and reporting. An example of detailed action, identification, lead responsible, and budget allocation. This is the zero carbon Whitby study. It provides a very clear pathways and responsibilities to different departments, which makes it easier to collaborate. The study details its methodology, assumptions, and data source used. It also identifies how funding sources will be utilized to create a zero carbon revolving reserve fund to finance the implementation of the plan. And Devanshi will speak more about the revolving reserve fund in the next part of this presentation. Very quickly, our resources thus far on accountability. As you know, in 2019, I think we were the first one to create a very simplistic climate lens tool that meant to serve all staff, and it meant to be kind of like plotting the seed of staff of what's yet to come up for a full climate lens, yeah, kind of like a implication. And it's still used actually today, and we'll be asking you what you, in the next Friday, we have this roundtable of CAC, and we'll be asking you what do you think about Climate Lens 2.0. Then we have the climate implications repository. Really, the idea here was to save time for staff that is going ahead with climate implications, as we did the brainstorming with certain projects and topics, and we also in this platform we have examples from municipalities that use climate implications. So if you're tasked with this, you can just go and copy paste the wording, and that will save you time. Also, the climate accountability toolkit that I mentioned, and we share the link in the chat as well. If you are regular in our webinars, you've seen this slide many times, but this is a continuation of our effort to be really accountable of what we are doing and how we are supporting you, and track the climate policy database across CAC through the climate policy database, but also track implementation through the Climate Action Atlas. These are upcoming accountability tools, climate integration, municipal plans, and consultation guide. As you know, we did this report on what it looks like climate integration in official plans, and now we are working in what it looks climate integration into wastewater, stormwater, and urban forestry. And overall, we are creating this consultation guide where we are gathering what questions needs to be asked when this integration is happening, and some examples as well. We will be providing. This should be coming soon. Another, as I mentioned, kind of like this is a tool that we have. As you know, SSG presented their GHG calculator. We really want to know if you use it. Do you find it useful? Do you need, or what else may be needed there? Because we are eager and happy to help you if needed in providing a GHG quantification service. And next Friday, we're going to discuss these questions, but I'm asking them now. And if you have input, please write it in the chat. But does this SSG tool work for you, or are you using any other GHG quantification tools? If it's not, if they're not enough, or if it's not working, do you think that CAP can get a staff member service that it's specifically doing the GHG quantification service, and that could be like a shared across CAC service that we can provide? And yeah, just let me know what you think about this, and we'll be brainstorming and discussing more next Friday. There's a lot of questions of like how it will be paid. Is it by project based or hourly? But first, let's figure out if there's a need of this. Okay, I'm almost at the end of my part of the presentation. In the implementation part, these are the questions that you ask. Not surprisingly, as mentioned, one of the biggest barriers is funding. So there's a lot of the questions were related to funding. Where is the money going to come from? What is a low-hanging fruit in terms of action so that implementation can happen even when budget or resources are limited? We are also asking this question internally between us to brainstorm it, and it's in Menti. So I'm very curious to see what you may have. But something before I pass it to Devanshi is, what are the best mechanisms found for implementing and evaluating adaptation measures at the municipal level? This is something that we heard from City of Calgary in their presentation on resilience and adaptation. Something that they stressed is the use of data to lead governance and strategy and key planning components. So for example, they did a natural asset inventory, combining bits of data from different departments, from water services, water resources, conservation authorities, vulnerability and assessment risks, transportations, and then they overlap it with the environmental significant areas to see how those pieces interconnected. They did the evaluation of natural assets, looking at 6 key eco-conservation areas, and estimate that natural infrastructure replacement costs 6.9 billion. But it generates a flow of 2.5 billion annually. So showcasing that assets provide service that have value it's helping the municipality to better understand and therefore protect this value and the assets. Those both pieces will support the development of environmental reserve and conservation reserve policy that supports resilience and adaptation. That was my part. So for those who join us later, on the back end, we have Menti happening. We'll be sharing the link again in the chat now, or you can just go to menti.com and I'll add the link in the chat as well. And these are the questions that we are asking you. We'll have a few minutes after the presentation to review them and to brainstorm. Please write the name of your municipality and the answers when you're in Menti. And now the next part of the presentation is on funding, and I'll pass it to Devanshi.
Thanks, Desi. Hi, everyone. Desi, you can move on to the next slide. Hi, everyone. So as we all know, funding is one of the major barriers that we all have seen across while implementing the actions identified in our climate action plans. It's no fun to have longer-term climate action plans and supporting actions identified with no funding to go along. So I'll provide a quick overview of what we've learned in 2022 and 23, and different ways through which municipalities are getting creative and seeking funding from all different sources to fund their climate action implementation. And we also welcome you to share what examples and what you would like to learn and what other examples you think will be of value. Next slide, please. So last year we saw that FCM was offering funding through all different streams, including municipal sustainable municipal building stream, community energy streams, which included community efficiency financing, so your residential retrofit programs, organic waste to energy stream, fleet electrification, and more. Generally, FCM funds cover 50 to 80% of eligible costs, and there is an element that you need matching funding to be able to apply to these funds. And in 2024, FCM has revised its funding offers and also included feasibility and capital streams to fund net zero transformation projects, which was a new one. And FCM will also be supporting municipalities to build their planning and operational capacity for tree planting projects. So we are yet to hear updates on that one, but we'll keep an eye out and have them present to the CAC network as soon as they have like more information. Next slide, please, Desi. So last year, we also saw some of the federal and provincial funding streams. We saw 2 adaptation funding streams. One was a bit general one, and one was a one specifically for coastal adaptation work, which was more geared towards the implementation. So we are hopeful that there will be more opportunities for adaptation funding as well in future. And other streams also, which are also open currently, included zero emission transit funds to fund all your electric buses and municipal transportation. There was incentives for zero emissions vehicles, which is IZEV, which covers $5,000 for light duty vehicles. There's one more, which is incentives for medium and heavy duty zero emission vehicles, which covers up to $200,000 for medium and heavy duty electric vehicles. And then there's, of course, the ZEBIP, Zero Emission Vehicle Infrastructure Program, which provides funding for charging infrastructure. And we also saw the EV Charge On program here in Ontario, which provided funding for public EV charger installation. But that was geared towards municipalities that are a bit more rural and outside the bigger cities, because the purpose of that was to expand the existing charging network in Ontario. But that is closed now. Let's see, next slide, please. So beyond federal and provincial funding opportunities, municipalities need to get creative to fund their local actions and also seek matching funds for other federal and provincial programs wherever they need. So in 2022 and 23, we've seen some innovative approaches like climate levies. We've seen municipalities stepping, of course, into federal and provincial funding, but we've also seen councils going ahead and funding climate action through their capital projects. And we've also seen some private capital. We've seen conversations around private capital utilization to fund climate actions, because that's also an upcoming method that a lot of municipalities want to tap into. For example, we heard from Peterborough, we heard from Halifax last year, where they've started charging environmental levies, which will fund their climate action and staff and a lot of other implementation actions identified in their climate action plans. Moving on, we heard from Peterborough last year, and they've implemented a climate change reserve to fund all the climate change projects that don't have funding or commitments from other departments in their municipality. So they've added a levy of 0.25% to their annual property tax bill, and it generates nearly over like $425,000 annually, which is a nice big pot of fund. And withdrawals, of course, are reported to, and they need like pre-approval by council. And some of the funded projects already through this pot of funding included EV charging stations, some alternative transit fuel projects, and a net zero fire hall. And also they have like a climate staff position. And there's a few more. Next slide, please, Desi. So Peterborough is not only relying on this climate change reserve, but they also have other smaller and medium-sized funding pots, and they are through sustainability funds, which is matching fund, which generally is a pool that covers matching funds for all the funding proposals where only 50 or 80% costs are covered. There's also a climate change action plan fund, which implements projects such as the Green Economy Peterborough Hub. And there's, of course, Peterborough has a big problem of flooding. So there's Flood Reduction Master Plan, which includes rain gardens, flood mappings, and all sorts of like flood protection measures, which is a big pot of $2 million or more. And there's other departmental fundings from forestry, energy, flood mitigation, and waste departments as well on climate action. Next slide, please. So for Halifax last year, we heard that they have started charging a 3% environmental levy on top of their property tax bill, and it is a commitment for over 10 years. This was largely because the council at Halifax was very environmentally conscious, and they framed the environmental levy as an investment into a better future, and they did have a lot of support from community organizations around the messaging around climate levy as well. So it was a nice positive story for them. So this 3% levy generates over $18 million a year, which is a nice, huge amount to fund a lot of their climate actions. And money allocation is for corporate building retrofits. There's EV strategies. There's some critical infrastructure for emergency, emergency infrastructure as well. And then funding is used also to electrify their transit, so e-buses and more. And for the first year, the expenditures included 9 new climate staff positions because, yes, in order to be able to implement this very well, you need dedicated staff who's responsible for actions implementation. And also they have a lot of electric buses now. We also saw that the town of Ajax started charging stormwater fees for residential and non-residential properties. This was because a feasibility study was conducted in 2021, which showed that the town was spending significantly less on its stormwater management as compared to other municipalities in Ontario. And approximately 50% of that funding also came from other federal and provincial grants, which were not like very reliable for each year. And hence, in order to get like more stable funding for their stormwater plans and management, they started charging a flat fee of $48 per residential unit on their property tax bill. And for non-residential properties, they charge 25 cents per square meters of impervious areas. So this is expected to generate $2.7 million of revenue only in year one, and also like this. So currently, this funding is used to upkeep their stormwater and like generally water-related infrastructure. But there's also an opportunity to use these funds for other climate action like flood protection and expanding, of course, green and natural infrastructure projects. Next slide, Desi. Yeah. So as Desi mentioned, we also heard from Whitby last year, and Whitby is tapping into revolving funds to address incremental costs to implement Zero Carbon Whitby, which is Whitby's corporate climate action plan. So this model reduces overall capital requirements by recycling existing capital. So basically, the energy savings generated by implementing some of these projects go back into the same revolving fund, which is also used to repay external loans. So it's a very, very nice model that they've adopted. Next slide, please, Desi. So as Desi touched upon the governance part and accountability part of Calgary, in the same presentation, we heard that the city of Calgary has also adopted a centralized climate fund, and it was approved as a part of capital budget in Calgary, which supports all the greenhouse gas reduction and climate risk mitigation actions. So it's a huge $30 million commitment over the 2023 to 26 business cycle, and the funding comes from various sources, which includes Municipal Sustainability Initiative Grant, Canada Community Building Fund, and pay-as-you-go grants and loans. And each funding source has, of course, different eligibilities and reporting requirements. So there's a whole different centralized climate fund team, which manages all the applications and evaluation process for this one. Next slide, please. So this is what we learned in 2023 and 2022, but going forward in 2024, we will be inviting staff from City of New Westminster, BC, to speak about their climate levy, and they have used a different model as the city owns its own electrical utility, so they've started charging a very small charge on top of the utility bills. So it's basically, it comes out to only like $1.25 per month on average residential electricity usage of 1,000 kilowatt or hours or less per month. So yeah, it's only like $15 per year per customer, but it generates over $500,000 for the municipality annually. And this funding has been allocated to be used for implementing city's corporate energy and emissions reduction strategy, which has like some actions identified already. Next slide, Desi. So this is very brand new, but in January of this year, we learned that the District of Saanich has a new tax exemption program which incentivizes the replacement of fossil fuel heating and hot water heating systems to electric in MURBs, so which is multi-unit residential buildings. So owners of residential, multi-unit residential buildings can receive a municipal tax exemption of up to 100% of the project. So like retrofit costs after accounting for other rebates, and it goes up to a maximum of 10 years. So basically, from what we understand, they are going to get a municipal property tax exemption of for all the costs that they spend to do this, like updates or retrofits. And similarly for commercial building owners, they can get a tax exemption of over like 50 to 80% of project costs for the term of 3 years. So we will also be inviting somebody from Saanich to come speak about this once they have a bit more implementation information to share from this. Lastly, we also saw this FRIP program, which is Financing Resilient Infrastructure Program, which is a partnership between cooperators, insurance, and ICLEI. And this partnership is actually like, this is working with 10 more municipalities to develop a suite of infrastructure projects, which will be fundable by private investors. So it's a very new model. We do have a list of participant municipalities, and we have already started seeing some projects getting implemented through this this initiative. So we're keeping our eyes out, and once they have some lessons to share, we'll invite them to share it with the CAC network. And that's it. I will pass it back to Desi.
Thank you, Devanshi, for that. So this is what we had in mind to summarize what we've learned, and we'll continue our work in 2020 in 2024 with focus on, like as Devanshi said, with some presentation for funding, also some examples, further examples of what implementation of adaptation and resilience projects look like. We'll be focusing on a little bit as the series evolve, we are moving to implementation. So talking more about how this looks like. Thank you very much for your answers. We are collecting more. If you have now for the next few minutes, if you can go to mentee and provide us more of this answers for the questions that we have. But also at this point, for the minutes that are left, I'm also opening it if you want to just tune in, share thoughts, comments, please feel free. Thanks so much for the comment for the SSG. Yeah, as I mentioned, so next Friday we have this roundtable of CEC, and this is one of the questions that we'll be exploring. It seems that you're still not yet testing it, so probably I need to ask this question in the next roundtable, which is going to be in April, I think. But yeah, this is we're curious to know what what tools you're using, and if the available tools now are useful, and if not, how we can help. Yes, the webinar is recorded, and we'll be sharing the slides and the recording to everyone. Okay, some of the answers from our mentee. What is lacking in existing mechanisms to fund your climate action? No equality and adaptation, money, yes. Senior management support and internal budget cuts. Yeah, kind of like what we also saw last year and what we spoke in the beginning of the presentation. Let's see, hypothetically, if you have all the money you need, how will you spend? Aligning capital and operational budgets, adapt the climate consequences, hire staff. Devanshi said it as well, and that's what I know that like we can roll our eyes when we hear that Calgary went from 5 to 35, but it is an important step if and I think that's one of the, I mean, funding, of course, it's a big reason, but what we are seeing is kind of like there's this alignment. There is a need of course, the commitment and then the action plans. And then once the plans are there, in order to start working on the plans, you need like staff. But then sometimes in order to have staff, then you need funding. So that's why what we heard from Newman, from like a bunch of municipalities actually that we presented, is that they use the initial, this like climate levy funding and like kind of like the initial funding, they use it just for staffing. So the implementation is not yet even happening because for the last like and this year they're still kind of staffing up, and then after that the implementation is happening. Climate lens and all RFQs and RFPs and council reports. Implement net zero buildings updates and build to revolving fund to support more low carbon projects in the community. I don't know who said that because, yeah, but is that a different municipality that is looking in the revolving fund? Who did write this message?
Hi, Desi. Supri here. That's me.
Is that for Ajax?
Yes.
Nice. Yeah, no, good. This is like, and you know now, and you have a bit more experience, but it is yeah, it is a leading practice, I would say, if you have a revolving fund.
Absolutely, absolutely. Especially because it's self-sustaining, right? Like, and you don't have to, for like the smallest of smallest inquiries, you don't have to put in that budget request and treat it as a capital project. So now you have like a source saying that, oh, okay, we have this revolving fund. Can we just like use money from there? And then it just keeps replenishing itself with all of the savings that we obtain from the zero carbon projects.
So are you trying to do this kind of like internally, or there's a consultant that is helping you in setting up the revolving fund?
Right now, we haven't started anything, but it's in the plan. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great. And do you think can it be done without the consultants? Like, can it be done in-house, the whole setup of the revolving fund?
It can be, but I feel like it has that push when it comes from externally, right?
Yeah.
So it's a better sell. That's what I feel.
Yeah. It is. I actually stopped sharing. I didn't go into the other questions, but thank you so much for responding. Because I see that we are at the end of the webinar. Thank you so much for everyone that participated. Any comments, feedback is welcome. I hope I'm going to see a bunch of you next Friday as well for our CAC roundtable. This is going to be no presentation really. It's more like us discussing certain questions. So yes, thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the day and happy weekend. Yeah.
Thanks, everyone. Enjoy your long weekend.
Bye.